Peonydust stretched, flexing her claws in the soil beneath her as the dawn rosy color seeped onto ShadowClan territory as day began to break. She heard paw steps behind her, and she looked back, smiling as Gooshade approached. He always made her smile. They were friends since they were apprentices, Maplespot being the only difference between their friendships or their views in life. Maplespot now was not her friend, but Gooshade put up with the orange she-cat. She saw Orchid Star pass, and a grin crossed her muzzle as he stepped up onto Shadow Rock, his words booming out. All cats old enough to catch their prey gather beneath Shadow Rock for a clan meeting. Those words were sacred to every leader of Shadow Clan ever since the clans were made. And now that Orchid Star was one of the last leaders, if this clan didn't succeed, it made a bit of guilt seep into her stomach. What if she was leader? Would she be better than Orchid Star? No. Orchid Star was an incredible leader. She looked as Gooshade sat next to her, and she watched Orchid Star. At least they would have 2 new warriors now. But they need kids in the clan. To think that nor Mouse or Hollypaw, or not Hollypaw, still Holly now, but Hollypaw soon, would even think about that? That was ridiculous. There was only 2 males in the clan, and Orchid Star was Maplespot's old mentor. She sat as she watched Orchid Star as Maplespot showed up. She was definitely late. Last cat there at the gathering. Well, the clan meeting. Like I said, we have 2 new warriors, or 2 new apprentices. But first, I want to test you all. If you don't want to be tested, and you don't agree with my choices, you may leave. But I need to know that cats coming into my clan are experienced. Orchid Star meowed, and Peonydust thought for a moment. They had never discussed this. Why couldn't they be apprentices now? Holly and Mouse were good cats. She saw Mouse stalk when they came back to clearing, when they came back to ShadowClan yesterday, and Holly, she was a barn cat. She must know how to hunt if she wants to survive. She heard Mouse meow behind her. I agree, and Hollypaw meowed the same. She looked at them and then back at the rock, a sickly smile crossing her muzzle. Then, Orchid Star began, I'd like to say Mouse and Holly will now be recruitments of ShadowClan. Now, join me outside of ShadowClan, Mouse and Holly. You will be in charge, Peonydust. Yes, sir, Peonydust meowed as she quietly sat beneath Shadow Rock, looking at her 3 clanmates. Sharppelt, who was the medicine cat, also a warrior though, as they needed cats to hunt, Maplespot, her begrudged rival, and Gooshade, her only real friend in the clan that wasn't Orchid Star or Mouse or Holly now. She trotted away and sat in the one patch of sun that littered camp. She looked at the 3 cats and saw as Sharppelt approached her. But she ignored that as Gooshade meowed. I wondered what their test is. I wonder, Peonydust agreed, and Maplespot seemed to glower at her. Honestly, I don't know. I was Orchid Star's apprentice, and I turned out fun. So, yeah, it was fun having them around. I'm the only cat that could go under Orchid Star's training. Maplespot growled, and she looked at Sharppelt as she meowed. I really want to know what the 2-leg place looks like. Too bad they're gonna fail. Maplespot growled and her ear flicked. Hopefully they pass, Gooseshade interjected. So many cats talking at once now in the clan that there was a gossip to actually talk about instead of the one they usually talked about, which was the beast. I know, as the deputy, you are sure of yourself. But Maplespot, you should honestly see that you aren't sure of yourself, because she stuttered a lot, but she managed to finally spit out the words. You were sure of yourself. You were going to become deputy, and I got chosen. Maplespot glared at Peonydust. Even though she stuttered her remark, she still got the point across. Peonydust chuckled to herself, and Gooseshade chuckled as well, and meowed to Maplespot. Yeah, you are quite sure of yourself. She snorted and dropped the leaf down next to her, the one Sharpelt had presented her right after the meeting. I deserved that spot, and I still do, Maplespot snapped. You and your sister are no goods, and I should be the deputy. I could actually lead this clan into greatness. Orchardstar's a little too much of a softie for that. She snarled, and Gooseshade flinched, Peonydust as well. Oh, okay, well, that's debatable, Gooseshade joked, and Peonydust smiled at his comment. You only got the deputy position because the leader, aka Orchardstar, felt sorry for you and your flea bag of a sister. Like I said, he's too soft sometimes. Doesn't mean I'm soft, though, since I was his apprentice. A sly grin crossed her muzzle, and Gooseshade flashed her a glare, and he meowed softly. Don't say that, Maplespot. Rosemist was a loyal warrior to ShadowClan. If you didn't have this problem with guilt, you wouldn't have been chosen. Maplespot continued on and snapped her claws down on the earth, almost controlling them to not attack her. No, if he hadn't been logical, I wouldn't have been chosen. Peonydust stumbled over her words, and Gooseshade meowed agreement. Maplespot, you need to learn to control your anger sometimes, Gooseshade whispered, and she looked at him apologetically. I'm sorry you always have to get wrapped into this, Gooseshade, she whispered, and he didn't seem to notice her stare. Say what you want, but you know deep down, if in that mouse brain of yours, I'm right. Maplespot growled. Peonydust flinched and held back tears as they slowly slipped from her eyelids down her rosy-colored cheeks. She watched as Sharpelt abruptly sprinted through the clearing, and she dropped herbs on Gooseshade's feet, then a flower in front of hers. Thank you, Sharpelt, but I'm gonna go watch Orchardstar. Peonydust raced away and quietly crouched as she saw a cat in the distance. Who are you? She thought, questioningly. She blinked as it faded away. The glistening silver cat had faded, had vanished. She smiled for a second as a couple of more minutes passed, and she thought about Maplespot's words. I should probably head back, she thought, knowing that Gooseshade and Maplespot probably couldn't handle each other alone. Maplespot might talk his ear off. She raced back to camp and walked in calmly, trotting past Sharppelt and trotting past her red flowers that were given to her by Sharppelt. After all, what I said about those outsiders had nothing to do with her. She stopped at Maplespot, who seemed to be yapping his ear off, just like she suspected. Maplespot. Peonydust meowed calmly. We all know from your attitude that you need a catnap. Now, probably would be a good time. Now shoo, before I make you. Peonydust meowed quickly, trying not to make her insult be any less childish. You rat. Peonydust snorted as Maplespot furrowed her eyebrows. I would have thought you would mourn for your sister a little longer. Maplespot snorted. You can go, Sharppelt. Sharppelt had asked to go to the carrying place not too long ago, and she had approached Peonydust for another final answer, and she agreed. Wait, what? She looked back at Sharppelt. She wanted to go to the carrying place? She ignored her, knowing Sharppelt would be a little smarter than that. My sister died a legendary death. I know she did. Peonydust caught a cry in her throat, and she shook it off. Please leave, Fleabag, before I make you, Maplespot. Go to sleep. A monster probably killed her. Maplespot snorted. Stop it, Maplespot. More tears began watering around her eyes. As Gooseshade meowed, I like your attitude, Peonydust. Fine, I'll leave. Maplespot snarled. I just don't even want to see those Fleabag outsiders when they come back. She stopped speaking as Orchard Star trotted into camp. She looked at Orchard Star as he quietly faced her, and she smiled back at Gooseshade. How did it go, Orchard Star? She whispered. And he seemed to ignore her as he stood up on top of Shadow Rock. Her violet eyes glistened, and she looked around the clearing, waiting for Mouse and Holly to appear. She smiled as she saw Holly, and wondered where Mouse was. I wonder where she is, Peonydust thought. A flicker of fern wafting above her nose. Her tail twitched. Where was Mouse? She studied Holly for a second longer before readjusting her spot on Shadow Rock. It was harder than expected. I thought it would be easier. Holly meowed to Sharppelt, who smiled back at her. At least they're making friends, Peonydust thought. She looked at Gooseshade for a second longer before he chuckled and meowed. Yeah, they are, which just made them more impressive. He smiled at Holly, and she thought for a moment when Orchard Star meowed. All cats, old enough to hunt their own prey, gather below Shadow Rock for a clan meeting. She watched Holly as Holly nodded in excitement, and then glared past at Maplespot. What does she have up her fur now? She thought, crouching down into a position where she could be a little bit more comfortable on the sunned rock. As the moon rose in the distance and dusk approached, she sat up, watching as Orchard Star meowed the greeting words. It had taken a couple more minutes as it was already sunset before, and Mouse had to do something. She didn't disclose what, but they waited patiently. "You look like moss," Maplespot snarled to Holly. "Oh, thanks!" Holly purred cheerfully, and Maplespot wrinkled her nose. Was that a compliment? Peonydust thought, or was Holly just taking it the wrong way? She disclosed that quietly and looked back to Orchard Star, but not before looking at Gooseshade, and then looking back at Orchard Star. Of course, since he was about to talk, he always had to think about what he said beforehand. Now it is time that the name for these young warriors to be named. They have showed potential and are able to provide for the clan. Orchard Star meowed. He had gotten more. Ever since Rose Mist's death, Orchard Star had acted less proper, more old, and she could see the age underneath his well-groomed pelt. Finally, they can be named warriors, Peonydust thought, or have a warrior name. Instead of Mouse and Holly, they could be Mousepaw and Hollypaw. Holly, from this day on, you will be known as Hollypaw, Orchard Star whispered. Her tail fluffed up in excitement as Gooseshade looked at her and then back to Hollypaw. She wondered who would be made the mentor of the two cats. She thought for another second and looked at Maplespot. Why would he choose Maplespot to be one of the deputies of them? She honestly could admit in hindsight that Maplespot was a good hunter and fighter, but incredibly toxic and rude. Any cat could notice that in her characteristics. Her tail twitched, and she waited for a couple more seconds when Orchard Star meowed. Your mentor will be... Oh, wait. Orchard Star looked at Mousepaw with a chuckle. Your new name will be Chartpaw, as you have a little bit of feistiness in you, she said. And Peonydust called out, Hollypaw, Chartpaw! Hollypaw, Chartpaw! Sharp yelled, and Maplespot meowed. Ugh, if I must, Hollypaw and Chartpaw. Holly smiled at the chanting, and Mouse seemed to too. Peonydust smiled for them. She felt so excited to have two new apprentices. She just didn't understand why Mouse had to be renamed. Mousepaw would be a perfectly fine name. Whatever, Peonydust thought. Orchard Star always had reasons for something, and if this was one of them, I will have my warriors train you. Orchard Star cut in her thoughts, and he meowed. Now, in the honor of training, will you accept to be trained, Hollypaw? Orchard Star meowed. Peonydust looked at him, a cheerful look in her eyes. She could be made a mentor. Oh, that would be wonderful, she purred. And then Orchard Star meowed. Gooseshade, do you accept to be mentor? Gooseshade said, Oh, yes, I'd love to. And a little bit of guilt crept into her stomach. But Hollypaw was definitely more acquainted with Gooseshade than her, so she didn't feel too bad. Now, Chartpaw, Orchard Star mumbled, and looked down at the silverish blue-gray apprentice with odd-colored eyes. Will you accept to be trained under one of our most loyal warriors, Maplespot? Maplespot seemed to have a frown cross her face, and she flinched. Peonydust started almost choking, but remained quiet. Miss Chartpaw looked at Maplespot worriedly. Oh no, this wasn't a good idea. She looked at Maplespot as she sarcastically meowed. Say that again. I didn't hear correctly. Orchestar showed a fang, but it quickly got covered again by his lips. I said, would you accept to train Chartpaw? Chartpaw's ears flattened, and her tail pricked. And Gooshade rolled his eyes at Maplespot's comment. The entire clan was in shock at once. Peonydust looked up at Orchardstar with wide, bewildered eyes. Why would Orchardstar choose Maplespot to train Chartpaw? Her jaw seemed to gape, and Orchardstar seemed to brush off the stares from Gooshade, Sharppelt, and her. You definitely have shown greatness. Peonydust looked at Orchardstar with a raised eyebrow, as Orchardstar meowed. I knew you heard me right the first time, Maplespot. Now train Chartpaw like I trained you. Peonydust's fur seemed to stop from prickling any further, as the orange she-cat quieted, and got a reluctant look on her face, as everything faded to white.